I wanted to just introduce this to you, and I've provided a handout on this. I did not create this handout. The handout was created by the National Institute for the Clinical Application of Behavioral Medicine, NIC ABM, so you have that, and it's cited on there, and it was developed by Dr. Paul Gilbert. Now, Paul Gilbert is a psychologist in the UK, clinical psychologist, and he developed compassion-focused therapy. Compassion-focused therapy is very big in the UK, and there's some training in North America, but it's quite difficult to find people that do this. That is a form of therapy, whereas MSC is really intended to be therapeutic. This is actually a form of therapy, but his work is spoken about in MSC. And so this is a model he's developed of emotion regulation. And I think it's important to understand this because the colored circles help me remember it too. So we look at these three circles that represent our emotional regulation system. And the red circle is the threat system. So the threat system is housed within the amygdala. So the amygdala is kind of in the middle part of your brain. It's about the size of an almond, and it's pretty much fully developed at birth. So all humans are born completely capable or very capable of experiencing threat. You put a pin into a baby, newborn baby, it's going to scream. So they feel pain, they feel this. It releases adrenaline and cortisol to kind of get you into action and stiffen up and be ready to do something. And it generates feelings of anxiety, of anger. Sometimes it can be of disgust, depends on the situation. The purpose of that, there's an evolutionary purpose, and he's actually a brilliant writer. If you read any of Paul Gilbert's work, he's very scientific. And the purpose of it is evolutionary, because when we first started out, and maybe still today, we were living in jungles or forests or whatever, and there could be a tiger. So better to be safe than sorry. If you hear rustling, you stop, you freeze, you run, or you get ready to fight it. Now, it might just be one of your other hunters or gatherers or a mouse, but it might be a tiger. And so you better be prepared if there's a tiger. It's for threat detection and protection. However, we haven't de-evolved from that, and we're still biased towards noticing threats. Just like I said, you read reviews of your presentation and there's 25 good ones and one bad one, most people are going to focus on that because there's a threat, right? So we do it in a psychological way as well. So another system is the drive system. And the drive system is the same system as a reward system. And so that's also can be called the addiction system, and it's fueled by dopamine. And it's in the nucleus accumbens, which is, I think I have a picture of the brain later. There's actually tons of stuff I just love to do on this. So that's a whole thing. And I love talking about the brain and looking at it and stuff. But what that does, the purpose of the drive system is to help us motivate. So our agency, our doing stuff, getting going, right? And it can be very positive. So it can be things like, I want to do this, I want to get an A+, why did I only get 92%? I want 99%. Let's work towards that, progress, like actually getting up and doing things. Some of you may have heard of this amotivational syndrome. And it's not in the DSM, but it's a term that's used for people who don't have a lot of motivation. It might just be considered like sluggish or deadbeat or whatever you might call them. But there's a lot of thinking that it has to do with a shortage of dopamine. They don't have that drive. They don't have that get up and go. And in our culture, Gilbert and others talk about this from a cultural perspective, we really reward people who spend a lot of time in that drive system. You're achieving, you're doing all this. When I did the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy training with a colleague of mine, and we spent all this time, focusing on our foot, And I said, yeah, we're going to go back, and I'm going to have that meeting with all these principals and vice principals, things like that. How was your summer? And what are people going to say? Busy, busy, oh, super busy. And I'm going to say, I spent a lot of time feeling my big toe of my left foot. What are they going to say? What kind of loser are you, right? Meantime, it's a therapeutic thing to do. So that's like, what have you been doing? And busy's the thing. I bet you're super busy. Awesome, me too, right? So that's a drive system. And then there's a soothing system. And that actually may surprise you, is housed in the prefrontal cortex. So right up here, that's an executive function thing. That's another topic I love. And it's very related to this. I mean, all these things cross over, and I love just thinking about all of this kind of crossover of the research and the knowledge that we have. So it's a executive function. You think of what happens with executive function. It helps you narrow your attention, shift your attention, regulate your emotions. Sounds a lot like what we're trying to do with mindfulness. Mindfulness actually, and there's fMRI evidence on this, trains and builds that muscle of your executive function system, your prefrontal cortex. I have a little blog that I wrote on my website on mindfulselfcompassionforlife.com, and I wrote it for adolescents. Well, I actually wrote it for parents, but it's on why mindfulness practice is helpful for adolescents, because it helps build their executive function. And so with the soothing, that's things like feeling contented, feeling safe, feeling protected and cared for. Those bonobos, the bonobo monkeys there, you provide that first of all, just like you do with executive function. You provide the scaffold for your child that they eventually can provide for themselves. And so it helps us to manage distress, and it also promotes bonding. Something that we know is that when you use a practice like mindful self-compassion, it activates the soothing system, which is physiological, and it helps you to, in particular, manage the threat system and also the drive system. So you can spend too much time there, and that's also not healthy. So here's a picture of the brain. I did put it in. All I'll say about this is, which I really like this, again, as a psychologist, I don't want to just have people think, oh, this is so touchy-feeling, and you're, all that, like where's your tie-dye shirt and stuff, which like all of that's good. But this is real science. And so when you're practicing MSC, it engages the prefrontal cortex, and that's what those little arrows are. The prefrontal cortex is the part right here at the front of your brain. The amygdala is that little, I can't point to it, but it's a little circle like in the middle. So when you experience emotion and stressors in that amygdala, and it takes your prefrontal cortex to regulate it. So I love this because there is evidence of it, and things happen in the brain when you practice it. And there's some proof of that. So now what I want you to do fairly quickly, this shouldn't take a long time, is for yourselves, draw your circles. What size are your circles? So the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system. In which circles do you spend most of your time, so relative to each other? Now, something that can happen if you're taking compassion-focused therapy is your therapist may ask you to revisit this as you go through it. And what do you think the goal is? Any ideas on that from the audience? So you start with identifying the size of your circles. And let's just say hypothetically your threat system's really big, and your drive system's the next one, and the soothing system's pretty small. What might the goal be after, a month, 6 weeks, a year, if you're going to redraw these circles?
You want them to be equal.
Absolutely. You want them to be relatively equal to each other, because if you're spending all your time in one or two of those systems and much less in the other, well, if the one you're spending the least amount of time in is a soothing system, you're probably not very well regulated. Now, if you're spending all your time in the soothing system, maybe that's a different story, but I haven't met many of those people. But yes, you want them to be balanced. Okay. So mindfulness is awareness, and related to mindful self-compassion, in order to ease your suffering, you first have to notice your suffering. If you don't notice it, You can't do anything about it. And they use these little catchphrases in MSC, so you've got to feel it to heal it. You've got to name it to tame it. And I took, some of the training I took was with Chris Gilbert, and he kept saying all these things, and then we would all laugh. But it's like, it's true. First you have to feel it, and then you can heal it. And by naming it, like, this is anger, or, even this hurts. What actually happens is not only do you recognize it, but by shifting into your language center, you move away again from that amygdala. So it's therapeutic. You respond to yourself with kindness and treat yourself like you would a dear friend when they're suffering. So there's one of the exercises we do in MSC, and I'm going to be doing this exercise in our next session, is an exercise around how would you treat a dear friend. And you consider in this picture here, this is how most of us treat a dear friend if we're actually a dear and helpful friend. And we don't always treat ourselves with that same level of kindness. So you learn how to do that. So the third aspect, again, in mindful self-compassion is that common humanity of knowing that the chances are that you're sharing the same experience with millions of people at any time. So you're not alone, but also everyone suffers. And that's part of the power of those parent-to-parent support groups, is it really brings forth that common humanity. Other parents have been in this situation before, or in a support group at work. Other counselors have been in this situation. We all make mistakes. None of us are perfect. And so a lot of the activities we do help to teach that. So even Mama Bear, I found this on the internet. I don't know the source actually, but I just love it. Benefits from self-compassion. Like, look at her surrounded by these butterflies, and, they can't just be brave and nurturing all the time. They need some self-compassion. Okay, so I'm going to actually do a final meditation with you, a brief version of this called Affectionate Breathing. And then we'll finish off with talking about some next steps and access to resources, etc. So, getting yourself comfortable again, finding a way where your bones are supported and you don't need to have a lot of effort to stay in that position, and closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. And now take 3 slow and easy breaths. Just trying to relax and letting go of whatever is burdening you at this moment. Letting your eyelids close or partially close, whatever makes you more comfortable. And if you wish, putting your hand over your heart or another supportive place to remind yourself that you're bringing not only attention, but kind attention to your experience and to yourself. And now finding your breath wherever you can feel it most easily. Perhaps at the tip of your nose, or as it enters your throat or your diaphragm. Just noticing where is that breath. Perhaps you feel it in your belly as your belly gently moves in and out. Out with each in breath, and in with each out breath. Letting yourself notice those sensations of breathing, and just feeling your breath for a while. Not trying to breathe in any special way, just breathing. Now your mind will naturally wander away from your breath every few seconds. And when you notice that, don't worry, because that's mindfulness. our minds wander. That's what minds do. And noticing your mind wandering is an act of mindfulness. Whenever that happens, just gently guide your mind back to your breathing. Just like you were guiding a little puppy or a child who had gone astray. Kindly bringing your attention back to your breath. See if you can incline toward your breathing, like you might incline toward a child or a pet, with curiosity and tenderness. Let your body breathe you. There's nothing you need to do. Noticing how your breath nourishes your body, even when you're not paying any attention to it. It's there nourishing you every moment. And now feeling your whole body breathe, gently moving with the rising and falling of the breath, just like the movement of the sea or the ocean. If you like, allowing your body to be rocked by your breath back and forth. Just like a baby being soothed and caressed. Giving yourself over to your breath. Letting yourself become your breath, gently rocked and soothed back and forth. And now, just take a few moments and savor the stillness of your body. Whatever you're feeling at this time. And in a moment, I'm going to ring a bell. And listen to that bell. And when you can no longer hear it, then gently open your eyes. Hope I haven't put any of you to sleep. That can happen when we start doing those meditations, partially because we find out how exhausted we are. If you have any questions about this presentation beyond what we've got today, you can send them to ACT. You can also submit questions to my Mindful Self-Compassion website, and there's a place there to contact the teachers. And you can also look for information on MSC. We have links there to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, etc. And I did want to just acknowledge this. These are in the handouts, and I don't need to read through them, but I have given you the names of and links to some excellent sources on mindful self-compassion if you want to learn more about it. You can look on, for example, the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion has a list by geographic location and by specialty of people that they have trained that are qualified. And so you should find me on there, but I think they just have me under Canada right now because, of course, it's international. It should be also British Columbia. Kristen Neff is one of the co-authors. Her self-compassion site has a lot of excellent resources, and she also, because she's primarily a researcher, has tons of research that she has done there. Christopher Germer's site, different kind of flavor to his site, a more clinical perspective and a lot of stuff about trauma as well. The Center for Mindfulness Studies is in Toronto. I've also done training with them, and they're nice even though they're in Toronto. Oh, hello, people from Toronto. We don't have a center like this out in BC, so I'm jealous. And the University of California Center for Mindfulness Medical School has great information, in particular about mindfulness-based stress reduction that Kabat-Zinn started, et cetera, et cetera. The Bangor site, it's not just that it's in Bangor and Wales and beautiful, they're a very rigorous site where mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and et cetera, Mark Williams and those people worked out of there. I've given you other Oxford Mindfulness Research Center, et cetera. There's been some great work. Shout out to Jonathan Weiss over at York University, where he has done some research on individuals with developmental disabilities and mental health concerns, and also using mindfulness practice. And if you look through the Journal of Autism and Developmental Disorders, you'll find some articles specifically on mindfulness practice with individuals with developmental disorders. I've put a summary of these mindfulness-based intervention benefits, just a summary of what the most frequent benefits are, what's increased, what's decreased. Thank you very much also, by the way, for supporting us this afternoon, supporting me, and most importantly, I hope, supporting yourselves.